Hey everybody, guess what? I am in between my practices here for my upcoming show, and I thought I would go ahead and start what I call the Apple II Playroom. And this is the, how do I say, I've amassed over the years over 900 Apple II discs. Some of them are personal ones that I've worked on, either programs that I've written or I've been a part of, and the others are just a byproduct of the 80s, which I'm sure a lot of you will understand what exactly that means. I'll give you an idea of what we're talking about here. So that is a current picture of what I still own, and I carry it around with me like a trophy. I know, kind of like the trophy you wish you could just throw out, but I do still have it. I actually still do have a couple of Apple IIs, and I'll go ahead and show those to you right now. They consist of this one here, which is in front of me, and I'm working on actually using this live, because right now I'm using an emulator, and I have to do that mainly because there's a couple of things. The graphics interface is not working to the level I would like it to. So when I kind of go through and show you these old archaic discs, it doesn't look as good as it could. So obviously I need to buy something more to make that look better. And then there's, I bought the wrong RAM drive system. So I ordered another one so I can not have to go ahead and load up all my discs one by one. Although there will be some, because they just don't, I can't copy the protected ones and put them on the RAM drive. And then the other one, I do have two, is this one over here. Nope, that's my JD. It's this one here. And we should all send thoughts and prayers for me if you can, because that one actually, it works, but you'll notice the Alpha Centauri that's there with it. It's not working anymore, and I'm really bummed about it, because I actually you know how your old gear is starting to fail. So that's kind of what's happening here. I turned it on and it failed. It just doesn't work. I've replaced all the ICs. I replaced one blown diode and one broken capacitor, but it still doesn't work. So over $100 invested in it so far, still doesn't work. So I'm working on that. I have to go check the rest of the circuitry on it, which I'm not an expert, but yeah, I'm hoping that maybe one day it'll get working again. So in the meantime, I do have here a couple of discs that I'm going to go ahead and show you. So this first one, and you might enjoy this. This first one here, I'm going to boot the system here. So this was a program I wrote when I was 15, and I'll let it run. I'm not proud of it. Well, actually, I am proud of it. For at the time, it was kind of fun. I think this ended up on one of the soft discs, one of those magazines that came out in the 80s that actually had a disc included. As you can see, it's called Destroyer, and I was really into the character generator kind of overlays back then. So go back in time with me. Like I said, I have over 900 of these discs that I figure I would go through, kind of make a historical log of what we're seeing here, and what has become of gaming over the years. And this one was basically, I had an idea which was probably not very original at the time, but it was just your typical Space Invaders, but with one ship at a time. So, hey, instructions, let's take a look at it. So I was really proud of the font. I think I might have modified this font, but I actually did have a character generator program and a ROM burner, and I was burning ROMs for your Apple II left and right, which would give you a completely different character set. And this probably was one of those back at the time. So as you can see here, it's pretty simple. You use your arrows left and right. You press the space bar, and yeah. And there's a text version of this. It's not pretty. And then this one has actually been compiled. So it's been written in AppleSoft, and then I wrote, I didn't write, I used one of the compilers that turned your AppleSoft into binary, which did a pretty good job, I have to admit. Not much modification required. So anyways, here it is in all of its glory. It's pretty horrible, but at the time, you got to remember, it was 1985, so get off my lawn. How many ships? Obviously, you only get one, but I am going to pick 3 because I like to torture myself and you. And here you go. You move left and right. We've got some screen, some flicker, because I really didn't do it. This was character generator, one of those overlays that we were working with. So you hit the space bar, your bullet goes up, and yeah, you basically can sit there and just hit space bar, obviously, and then it would just kind of like chug in frame by frame, but you're losing your bullet. So there you go. You make the hit and then you move on. This is really riveting for 1985. But this day and age, kids are going to just be like, Dad, what are you doing? So you die, you move on. And the whole idea was to see exactly how many ships you can get. Yeah. Really, this was highly entertaining back then. And now, not so much, but you get the idea. And then, so I'll bore you a little bit longer here. I am using one of the enhanced Apple emulators, which works pretty well. So there you go. Destroyed 6 saucers. Yeah, I have 2 character fonts in there, as you can see. And that was basically the game. So let's take a look at that just for grins and see what it's all about. Gonna reboot again. So I'll go ahead and stop the load. And this is, a lot of these discs, this is the first time I've seen them as well. So I'm gonna be hemming and hawing and trying to figure out what the hell I'm looking at. So basically that bottom, that runtime, and I think you can see my mouse, the runtime is the actual little bit of binary code for the interpreter, for the compiler. The HRCG, RLoad, RBoot, those were part of the actual character generator set. So you could create your own fonts. And, you know, a lot of people were doing that. You kind of like, instead of having to program graphics, you just did the cheap and cheesy, quick and easy. And then we've got a couple of the support programs for the compiler. And then the game here, Destroyer itself. And it looks like I've saved the des.hi. So if we look at that, I believe that's the original version of the game prior to compilation. And there it is. And from what I remember, that line 1 on air, go to 280, that would, when you compile it in the actual compiler, you couldn't break out of it. Any type of error, I believe even reset, would basically jump back to, you know, used an interrupt, and it would just jump back to that one spot. So there we go. It was like a month and a few days shy of my birthday in '81. So that would put me at 15. So now I've given away my age on my first video here, but that's okay because age is a number. Stop bullying me. So your error here, 240 was it? Anyways, yeah, you know, we've got just the basic code going on here. It looks kind of ugly, putting together the characters and checking. There's the if CK string, that was obviously checking for collisions. And let's see what else we got. Our explosion. This is when I commented my code with just vague comments. You should do that. If you're coding, comment. It's important. So when you get fired, they know what the hell you did. Okay, we got our sound routine. We've got our instructions. So all of this went through that compiler. Not very long. I mean, not very impressive, but it did what it needed to do. So if we look at the whole routine here, lit. So the first thing it does, it runs load characters. Why I didn't init the disk with load characters, who knows? But redundancy. So let's take a look at that so you can get an idea of what's going on. So let's see, we're B-loading the rboot. We execute it, and then HRCG, that was the high-res character generator that creates our graphical environment, and the fleet1.set and fleet2.set, those were, and count.set. So there are 3 different characters. You saw in Destroyer those 2 different fonts in the beginning, and then the characters for the ships. And that's it. When it's all said and done, it execs starter, which is obviously going to be a text file. So there it is. I've already assumed that I was kind of a dick back then, and I'll explain that. If I go ahead and just do moncio, we'll see what the secret is of how to load this thing. And of course, what do? I turn it off. So it's kind of like, I don't know what the hell I was thinking, but I didn't want you to see it. Obviously, I'm loading runtime, loading a couple other things. And this is what it looks like when you don't load the character generator to it. So it gives you just kind of this, text interpretation of what it all looks like. Kind of fun. We'll reboot that and go ahead and stop it again. See if there's anything interesting on this. I don't think there is. That's pretty much it. So that was it. That was like one of my first games. Not the only one, but one of them. So let's take a look at another disk that I found. And this one, catalog this. So this is, well, once upon a time, story time, I worked for a company called Datamost. And Datamost was one of the software companies back then releasing Apple II software. The story is, I used to beg my mom to take me to UCLA to go to the Apple user meetings that were there. And yes, in the movies, All About Apple, that one big scene where they're at Royce Hall and they're debuting the Mac, and it's the first one, and it's gonna say hello. So those were the meetings I went to, and this was before that. This is a few months before that, and they had an Apple II up on stage with a 5 megabyte hard drive. This thing was amazing, and I had to go. I mean, I went every month. And so my mom dropped me off, and I sat there. And at this time, I was already pretty much exploring everything about the Apple that should be known. And if you continue to watch these, you'll see a lot of these discs have a certain name on them, which I think is statute of limitations over. I think it is. I knew a bit about the operating system and how it worked. But hard drives, for a 5 meg hard drive, I think it was $1,000. So I'm sitting there, they brought it in, and oh, hey Brian, how's it going? Oh yeah, exactly. You know all about the character generator in Apple. Yeah, exactly. 11. See, you were ahead of your time. So yeah, I sat there, and they got up on stage, all these grown men. Again, I mean, I was 13 at that time, maybe 14, and they were trying to get it to work, and they had it on the big screen, and they would run the program. They're like, we're going to show you, it's going to load these pictures so fast, and they hit run, and it like syntax error, run syntax error, and this went on for 5 minutes, room full. I mean, it was, I don't know how many people Royce holds, but 1,000 at least. And I sat there, I got very impatient. And I finally, I don't know what possessed me, but I got up, walked up on stage, and I almost pushed them aside. And I went, look, I know what the situation is. And the situation was this. They had a program. It was really a stupid program. And it basically was as simple as loading file names off of the hard drive volume. Problem was, what's this? The hard drive volume, for some reason, and at that point they didn't really understand, if you went to load something, like for instance, I have 2 drives hooked up. If you do catalog comma D2, there's your drive 2, and if you do catalog D1, there's drive 1. I don't know what possessed me, but they're sitting there, excuse me, and they're looking at this, and they're like, look, it's like B loading, whatever, B load, whatever, comma drive 2, file not found, right? Well, one of the things that I learned in DOS, like for instance, fleet1.set, and we're on drive 1, right? So I was like, well, there is a way to load stuff on the second drive, and you can do this, and I'll just show you if we just do catalog drive 2. That's sorry, I've done too many control characters. Catalog drive 2, wonderful. Now we're on drive 1, wonderful. You can also do this. You don't need the comma. So I knew this, they didn't, and I went up and I reprogrammed their code. I got rid of the comma, loaded it, pictures come running through. I was like, whatever. I sit down, the show goes on. The end of the show, I'm walking away, and this man smashes this book into my chest. Basically, it was how to program the 6502, and he was like, call me if you want a job. And that was Dave Gordon from Datamost. And I sort of was like, okay, interesting. I was, I think, in 11th grade, and I was just starting 12th. It was coming up next year. And I had a decision to make. I went through the first month of school, and I'm like, you know what? Dave, call him up, Dave, how much does this pay? And back then, it paid $24,000 a year. I don't have any problems telling you that. And back then, that was an interesting amount of money. I wasn't sure how much really that was, but it was a lot. So I kind of told my parents, look, I'm sick of school, and I want to drop out and work for Datamost. So my parents took me to school, and they talked to my counselor. My counselor was very upset. He was like, look, this is not a great career move. Like, this is high school back in the 80s. It's like, you really should think about what you're doing. You have your whole future in front of you. I mean, how much are these people even paying you? Just write it down on a piece of paper. Write it down. So I write it down, 24,000, give it to him. He looks it over. He goes, that's more than what I make. Get out. Exact words. Parents were shocked. Took the proficiency. 1 week later, I was out. Next week later, I had a job. So I did various bits of programming for them. And then I dropped into the big evil. And it was kind of like at the darkest times of my life in the industry, because I worked on copy protection. Look, if you know me, I did work on copy protection, disk protection, but I knew the score, and we can leave it at that. It was a fun time. Nobody got hurt. Nobody cared. And it really was. It was a lot of fun. Getting back to this disk, sorry about that whole long-winded. It's the first video in my Apple II Playroom. So you get all the history now, and then, I won't bore you with this later. So this disk, actually, one of the games that we had, I believe it was Snack Attack. It was like a Pac-Man ripoff. Datamost was great. They were great for releasing. They did Swashbuckler, which was a great game, and then they just released a bunch of ripoff games, which were actually pretty damn good. Because even back then, the ripoff games were amazing. So one of the things that I wanted to do is a lot of the disk protection would just fail. You would make a copy, it wouldn't do anything. Make a copy, wouldn't do anything. So my disk protection, again, used a lot of hardware to actually rewrite the headers and make sure that they were within the range acceptable for 90% of the drives to read them. And yes, we had this station, or bless this woman's heart, she would make copies, and then she would boot them on a regular Apple. And if they failed, they went into the fail pile. And it really, that's what you did back then. There really was no way around it. But there was kind of more of a laxed situation that we had here, in that if it failed, I didn't just smash the head into the side of the rail. I gracefully exited with this game. And that was, and some of you might remember this if you even had the game, if you copied the disk and in that copy it failed, it would just kind of give you the Datamost logo with a pair of lips that stuck a tongue out at you. And that looked something like this. And I think this is the hee, which is the basic version. Or no, that's obviously not the basic version. It was ha. So this was, once again, this was done in basic, and then I did it as a concept, and then it was actually compiled and written in binary. So I think this one was actually ha. So there you go. You boot, it would fail, it would go ahead and give you the give you the lips, and then it would wipe memory completely with a bunch of FFs and drop you into DOS. So that was that. And there's some source code in there. My next thing is I have to find the actual which editor I used to write this, and then we can look at source code one day. The actual code for this, I believe, is RB. Let's take a look. This was at 801, of course, because why not? 800 is too easy. So I have a feeling that was the code, but I have a feeling that if we load that again, because now if you look at our memory, 801 where it loaded, oh, it's still there. Okay, so this one actually doesn't wipe it. The final code did. But I bet you we actually have to turn on page 2. And there it is. And I think the coordinates for that are relative. So if I run this again, it's just going to pick up where it left off. So you actually have to run it from a new state, and then it will actually do that. So that's what that disk is. Silly stuff, absolutely. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got for now, because I have to start practicing again for my show on the 2nd. But I'll do these as much as I can. I have, like I said, a plethora of discs to go through, and what better place to do it than online, right? There's a lot of these regular games are available online. You can actually get the enhanced Apple IIe emulator is what I'm using, and it's pretty cool. Once I get my actual Apple up and running, we'll use that as well. But I would check it out. I'll put these eventually into an archive, and you can download them, check it out. I actually also have an Atari with 1 billion discs as well. Those were not mine. I may do something with that as well. But for now, I think this whole Apple thing is going to keep me busy for quite some time. So anyways, hope you enjoyed that. And reboot.